Okay, well, we'll do the first. We're going to do top 3 misses. So properties that you wish you had purchased. They came across the table and you hummed and hawed. You sat on the fence and you're like, yeah, I don't see the upside, or this doesn't really make sense. And you're like, man, if I look back, I wish I would have squeezed every dime I had. I would have traded all my RAV4s in for one of these houses. Like, just what was the one?
Oh my gosh.
There's got to be one property deep in your brain that like I see them sometimes. I'll see some that like resell on market, and I'm like, for frig's sakes, like especially like single family homes in the last couple of years, I'm like, man, I was gonna buy that and live in it. Instead, I blew a bunch of money on rent. Or like, there's been a couple development sites that I've heard trade off market that I'm like, oh yeah, I saw that one go by for.
I mean, I'm trying to think of these off the top here because it was a bit different than what I thought. We'll start with a really small one. There was a duplex in my backyard. Like literally, I'm on a corner, so it's like in my backyard. And this was about 4 or 5 years ago, like not that long ago. And it sold for $292,000.
Free.
Which is free 99 basically. And it was good. Like they're side
Solid
by
little
sides,
units,
like, garages on each unit. It's like good.
that
And
Amelia?
what's that? Yeah. You know the one.
Yeah, I know the one.
It's literally in my backyard.
Yeah.
And so like I share a fence with these people and I should have purchased it. The timing was just bad. Like, but I also didn't get aggressive on it. And it recently relisted for something like $600,000 or.
Did it sell?
No, it didn't sell.
Probably worth that though.
It's still sitting there in my backyard, and now it makes no sense to buy it. But in hindsight, having it, and just this is one that purely for my family. Like, one, I would put a couple families in there that have kids to play with my kids, and two, I have a long-term concern about the cost of real estate and where my kids are going to live.
Say your kids are going to live in the.
Having a property right next to ours as they get older and they start their families, I actually think about that sort of thing.
Chandler's be the one calling his kids like, it's a little late to have lights on.
Or
what
like,
are you guys
pull
doing
your
over
blinds down for God's sake. So like I kind of feel like, that's a small little one, and I don't know that there's much to take from that, but that's one that I kind of wish I picked up.
there? Okay.
What's your first?
I'll do one that's very similar then maybe. How's that? So it's on a street. I've talked about the street a bazillion times. I own 7 buildings on that street. I had bought my first building and then I was trying to buy neighboring ones. So I just looked up everyone's phone numbers and I was calling all of them. And so I found some. I bought two more buildings and there were 6 units and I paid for $360 for each of them, which even that felt a little aggressive. Because they were in dilapidated shape. They needed everything. Doors were screwed shut, windows were screwed shut. They were boarded up. I called the neighbor. He said he wanted, this is a weird number, but $426,000. And I was like, $426,000 for a 6 unit. I just paid $360.
What a weird number, 426 too. Not 425.
$71,000 a unit for whatever reason.
Okay.
And I was like, you're out to lunch. Like, what? No chance. Anyways, someone else bought it for 460 or 426, maybe 6 months later. And now I'm trying to buy it because I own the properties on both sides of it. And he wants 1.25. And it's not worth 1.25, but it is to him.
No, it is not.
So
it is not.
It is to him. And so, and he's not, and I've been bugging him for the 2 years since. And he's not willing to do anything less. And I'm like, fuck, because it would have been nice to have. Then I'd have, I don't even know how many square feet in a row. Like it would have been probably 100,000 square foot lot with all of my lots combined, and not really worth anything today. Like it's good as 6 units and they're good for what they are, but maybe in the future, you never know.
Yeah,
right?
25, 30 years from now when the economic life of those buildings is back getting down, that you could look at it and be like, okay,
yeah,
I've got enough space here with the center plan where I could go for a development agreement.
Yeah.
Because there's enough acreage and really do something major there. You know what? You talking about that reminded me of my second one. So I own like 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, like 9 parcels. All
Jesus, we got it.
Besides each other, with the exception of one that's in between me. Oh, you find this funny. I like it. These are sometimes called stubborn nail houses. And it is a poo hole. Like it is the disgusting.
It literally is a poo hole.
It is one of the worst properties inside the circumferential in Dartmouth. It recently caught on fire, and somehow
still kicking.
Somehow one leg missing, still kicking. It's still being rented out, but it's terrible. I remember this person bought it for something like $160,000, $170,000, something like that.
Yeah.
And I do not need this parcel of land because I have the development agreements for all the pieces around it, but it would be convenient to have, right? I could make a building slightly larger, or better than that, I could just level it to the ground because it's disgusting. And we had an agreement at 270, and then he said, no, we need a bit more, so 280. Then he said, no, need a bit more, and then he said 300. And then I think it was like 325, and it just kept going up and up and up. And then eventually he got to like a number at like 350, which I was like, this is ludicrous. And who knows? Even if I had said yes, I'll do it, whether or not he would have done it, because he seems to not have all his marbles. Yeah. And I think last time I asked, he wanted 600.
Man, this is like the properties you see downtown. You need to just build your buildings.
Oh man, here's the thing: like his property has gone up, up, up in value, and then as soon as I build, it is going to drop off the face of the earth and never be worth even what it's worth in this moment for some period of time. Because one, it's going to have to be torn down soon. It's in that bad repair.
The lot's so small that you can't build anything on there.
You can't build anything on there. It has no parking. It has no anything like. So I'm his. Not only I'm not his get out of jail free card, I'm his once in a lifetime cash in card, and he doesn't want to play it. But my ego and my stubbornness in the moment to not overpay, I lost perspective, and no one could have seen the market do what it's has done since. However, I should have maybe had a bit more foresight and found a way to make that one happen.
Yeah, that's similar to what happened with this one. All right. That's I know the property. I remember when it caught on fire. We drove over to take a peek and see what was going on.
I was hoping it burned to the ground. I was like, I came with my kerosene bottle and I was just like a little spritzer.
Chandler's going to jail. All right, I'll give another one. So this is a house. It wasn't that long ago, probably about 8 months ago. Maybe a year, but I'd say 8 months ago. And the house came up and it had a 1 acre lot. It's about a half an hour from downtown. But the zoning is really advantageous. And so I had some clients that buy out there and I was like, hey guys, like this house is on here. It's got 1 acre land, good zoning. Probably get a multi-unit on here. But there's a house now, so you can just put down 20%, maybe even 10% and rent it out. And it was only $225K. And anyways, they said, no, I'm not interested. Blah, blah, blah. And I was like, well, maybe I should buy it. I'll just buy it and I could put a multi-unit on it. And I hesitated, and I don't know what I was thinking. And then it had a multi-offer bid, and they accepted an early offer. It was pending for like 2 months, and then it finally firmed up at $255,000. Sure enough, I know the guy who bought it. Talked to him. He got approved a permit for 100 units.
Mm-hmm.
I tried to rebuy it from him then for $1 million.
Yeah,
I talked about it on here before, and it just pained me to think that I could have even just bought it for the 250. Anyways, I didn't buy it for $1 million. Somebody else did buy it for $1 million or $1.1 million. I heard recently that it has reappraised for $3 million. So he flipped it over, made whatever it was after permitting, probably $600,000-$700,000. And then the next person now is up another $2 million.
Well, they're coming back down on reality on that.
They're going to come back down. And when I ran the numbers up a bunch of times, it didn't make a ton of sense to build it as 100. Like I was going to go to an 80, and even that, like it was going to be an expensive build, and there was a bunch of other weird stipulations, but realistically, it was still worth a hell of a lot more than $250.
Oh my God.
And it would have been so nice to be able to just buy it, put down 20%, $50,000, and rent it out. And whenever many years it takes, eventually just have an 80 unit build site in a nice neighborhood ready to roll.
So I think takeaways so far, my first one would be, try to always stay looking forward on any opportunity, right? Like to not kind of just dismiss one offhand because you want to be like, all right, what could this be 5 years from now? Where am I going to be 5 years from now? Is this going to be a property that adds something to my life 5 years from now or not? The second one for mine was to not let ego and stubbornness kind of get in the way. Any takeaways for you from those first two?
I think get my ass off the fence. Like I am a very cautious buyer. The 426, I know I said like I thought he was insane and all that. I wouldn't say it was an eagle play for me. For me, it was just like I was nervous already buying at the price that I was buying at. And that was just because the neighborhood was so beat up when I got in there that it was hard to fathom doing it. And I hadn't finished the other buildings I had bought, so I didn't know what the model was going to look like. Like I didn't have confidence on what I was going to get for rents on the end. And so projecting the lower rents, it was hard for me to see the end. And the appraisals at that time were not that exciting. I used an appraiser that really was not aggressive. On those, not even, probably like 785 or something. Like it
Right.
was real low. So by the time you take your refine, I only had like 100 grand to renovate a building that needed like 400,000 bucks. And so that was kind of soft. And then the house on the acreage was just like kind of saw it, kind of thought about it, recommended to a client, and then was just kind of like humming and hawing and didn't get super serious about it. Like I find anytime I don't get super serious about it, I get kicked in the butt and the deal goes. Like you need to be all over it and get it going. And that's what I should have done. I should have even just thrown it under offer. I should have just tried to throw, even if I'd thrown something and I'd feel a little better to know that I got beat. Like
Right.
I just did one recently where I got beat and I was like, whatever. Like at
At
least
least you played the game.
I showed up.
Yeah.
I didn't even show up to this because I was just kind of slacking. And I was like, I'll call the agent later. And then it took an offer early. I'm like, well, I should have. If it was for my client, I would have called them the first friggin' day and we would have been in there on the early offer day competing against the other early offer. Because for me, I was just like, well, whatever.
He who hesitates. My last one is kind of similar in a lot of respects, and I talked about it on this property before. There was a building that was on my to-call list, and it had been on my to-call list for years. I still have that to-call list somewhere, and I haven't really learned my lesson because I haven't been calling the other ones either. I mean, the 12 unit that I just closed was from that to-call list, but this one was on there for the longest time, and I never approached them. And then a friend of mine called me like all excited because he had just bought this building. And he was describing them like, I know that damn building. And so not only were these sellers, and not only would have only taken one phone call, but they sold at a good price. And I tried to buy the deal from him for, I think, 115 or like 15,000 per door more than he paid. Can't remember how many units it was, but a few $100,000. I tried to just buy the deal from him on reassignment, and he wouldn't do it because he got that good of a deal. There were two takeaways that I took for that. One, you got to
trust your friends.
You got yeah, he greased me now. One, you got to make the calls, right? Like you've got to be consistent. You got to continue to keep the pipeline going.
Yeah.
And you can't hesitate on that. The other thing is, I sort of assumed they wouldn't be sellers because they had a family name that I knew kind of peripherally. I didn't know this particular part of the family, but I knew the family name, and I believe they just weren't the type to be sellers because oftentimes they weren't. But I was wrong, and they sold it, and they sold it at a good price. And you know, that's one, I know this guy. That property's never going to come back to market, like not for 35 years. So that's one that's just gone into the universe and will never be back.
That's a good point. I like I'll always assume everyone's gonna be a seller. You kind of have to. And sadly, sometimes the ones you think are most likely going to be, and it makes the most sense for them to be, they're not. But sometimes the ones that you least expected are. And sometimes other developers and whatever aren't necessarily as crazy because sometimes people, it's like their one property, they want some crazy number.
Yeah.
Developers are more realistic. Like this is the income, this is what it's worth, and this is what I have.
And everyone's a seller eventually, right? So sometimes it's on a longer timeline. Right?
True.
So.
Last one, I'm going to be I have to be even more vague in some sense, but it was brought to me from a friend of mine, and he had put a property under contract. It was a large commercial property with a big piece of land, probably 10 acres. And
that's a lot.
He's like, look, I'm buying all this, and I need a couple partners on it. And so he had a meeting with me and 2 or 3 other people in his office. That it was an evening meeting. We sat, he presented it, kind of talked about what might be the potential and what the couple options were. It didn't have anything like as of right, didn't show any kind of value right off in the future. He was paying market value. The seller is a very well-known person who knows exactly what their stuff is worth, and they were like, this is what it's worth today. That's what I'm willing to sell it for. And it was probably, I think it was in the $7 million range. And anyways, he needed basically he was bringing a couple people in, and he was hoping to get a couple $100,000 from each person to help finalize the down payment. And we were each going to take a percentage out of it. He ended up closing it. I backed out the main reason was I backed out is I Googled his name, and there was some pending issues with other financing contracts he had going on. And so it gave me kind of the heebie-jeebies because I was nervous that he was in a bad place and that I might get caught up in it. Come to find out now, it's been whatever it is, 2-3 years since probably more than that, 3 years. And that property got rezoned to allow for, I think, almost 1,000 units. And so now he's up from whatever $7 million purchase to probably around a $25 million value. And it would probably sell pretty freaking quickly to some large investor, even if it sold for double. Like, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like, and it was rented the whole time, and it was at a commercial deal, so it was a decent cap rate, so like a cash flow the whole way through. So to pass that one up now, I'm looking at it like, damn, that was. I was talking to him, I bumped into him the other day, and he was like, yeah, you know that one, that one's now worth X, and I was like, oh, shit. But You know what? I don't know if I'm as regretful for that. Like, I'm regretful because I didn't do it, but I feel like the logic at the time for not doing it made sense.
Was sound. Yeah, totally, man. And that was also a couple years ago. That would have been a major risk at the time.
Yeah,
right?
exactly.
So, yeah.
Right.
Let's talk about your wins.
Yeah. Top 3 wins, the more exciting stuff. Number 1, I've talked about it a bunch of times on here. It was a single family home in the south end of Halifax. I was sitting in class. At that point, I owned a duplex. I had flipped a single family home, and I had a little bit of cash from trading, selling cars. I just had a little bit of cash in my account. I was trading a ton of Bitcoin actually at the time, and I was on Viewpoint here locally, just scrolling constantly, not paying attention in class. And one popped up just one block over from the university. For $350K. I had been watching it. It was listed for $700, then it was listed for $600, $500, then they dropped it to $350. And I literally was sitting in class and I saw the update and I was like freaking out. Called the listing agent and I was like, I need to get in this property today. She got me in there that same day and I was like, I want this place. Like, I need this place. Let's do it. She hyped me up too. I got to give her mad credit. I need to call her back or go see her. At that time, nobody paid over ask. And she was like, you got to go over asking on this. $5,000 over ask. I was going to do 1,000 over ask. I was going to do 351.
Look at you go.
And she was like 355. And for me, I was like, holy Jesus, the $4,000. I will never financially recover from this. This is insanity. Like, I cannot do this. Who's paying over for list for properties? Nobody. Like, I don't think any houses that year sold for over list. I was like, all right, I'm taking your word. And I remember her saying when we were sitting in her office at like 9 p.m. She's a good agent. She was there with me all night to keep me into it. And she goes, she's like, I promise you will not regret this. You will come back in a few years and thank me for doing this deal. And in my head, I was like, that's what every realtor says. Like, there's no way, blah, blah, blah. I was like, whatever. It's going to be an okay deal. It's not going to be that great. Well, I'm going to go back. It's been a few years and I'm going to thank her because it was the greatest thing ever. I bought it for $355. I turned the single family into a triplex, rented it to students. It's now worth, I think, $1.1 million. I pulled out a bunch of cash and that was the first property that I was sitting in class and I got whatever it was, $176,000 back in my bank account, and everything changed. I was just like, holy crap, like this is the game.
Yeah, crack the code.
I've cracked the code. I'm not working as an engineer. I'm making this happen. So that was the one that like started it all. Shout out, can't shout her out. She's still a realtor, and she was good. She's no MKR, but she was good.
Yeah.
But anyways, what's your top hit?
Let me see. I'll do kind of a fun one. The one that got me started is my first one because, I remember like I was there signing the paperwork and like my hand was shaking. And this is after I'd been a realtor for like 6 months. So other people was like, yeah, buy this house, man. It's no big deal. And then I go to buy one. I remember I was working at an open house. But we had seen the property and really liked it. So I like jetted over to my in-laws, fired this offer together, and like my hand was nervous. And same deal, it was on for like $239, and I'm like, all right, I want to make this offer good enough that they'll accept it right away. So I went $234, right, close enough that they're just gonna like take it, and they did. But anyway, I also then randomly, you'll appreciate this, I got a really good deal on a luxury vehicle.
Ooh.
I had a client who was quite eccentric, and she was a funny lady, and she had this Lexus RX 3000. Is that what they call it, a 300?
Be like a 350 or 300.
Okay.
Yeah.
And her ex had bought it for her, so out of spite, she never drove it. She sat that sucker in her driveway in Bedford, and it never moved, to the point that it dented the asphalt. And everyone that knows, like that has fancy cars, know that's kind of the worst thing you can do for a fancy car. But like it was, for the time, very tricked out. Sunroof, tinted windows, leather interior, 5-disc changer in the trunk. Like this thing was legit.
Pull over and go to the trunk to change your CD.
Yeah, you got to pull over. Yo, put in that new EPMD. So she moved, like she was moving out of the province, and she wanted to get rid of this thing, and it was $10,000. Problem is that it sat there and never run. So anytime someone came to drive it, something would go wrong. It's like, it wouldn't turn over. Okay, it needs a new battery. Now it's $8,000. Someone goes to drive it. Oh, this wouldn't work. The console would act up. She puts another $1,500 into it, drops the price again. And now she's out of province, and she's like, hey, I've got it stored at this guy's house because he's going to sell it for me. But he says now that he doesn't want it in his driveway anymore. Can I store it at your house? I'm like, no, you can't store it at my house. I think at this point it was like $7,500.
Yeah.
She's like, would you buy it? I'm like, no, thanks. She's like, what about $5,000? I'm like, honestly, like I don't really want it. I'm driving a beautiful Hyundai Sonata right now. I'm in a good place in my life. And she goes, what about $3,500? I'm like, okay, sold. So I had this gold Lexus RX 300. I had the sunroof open, and I was just cruising and feeling pretty good about myself. And like I was driving it for about 2 weeks.
Yeah.
And I started noticing like little things. One, I don't think she was a great driver because there's all these dents in it. So I checked out, I was going to go to like the dent guy, and like I got a quote for $1,500 to take some of the dents out.
Yeah.
And then the AC went.
That's a lot of dents, by the way, because I've gotten some dents pulled for like $300.
Yeah, there's $1,500 worth of dents. And so then the air conditioning went. Right? Like, and everything on these cars costs so damn much money. But I'm like, okay, I'm going to put some money into the dents. I'm going to put some money into the AC because then I'll have this car. And man, we're sitting in that first place that I ever bought, just watching TV. And I just remember hearing this massive crunch, like just a big noise, but it sounded like it came from behind the house. I'm like, oh, that's weird. Someone got in an accident down below. Then I hear a knock at the door. And this guy's at the door. He's like, is that your gold Lexus? I'm like, yeah. He's like, I just hit it. Sorry. So this guy hit it with a F-150, smashed this thing. But I will say, these Lexuses, they're built tough. Like he had to get towed. His F-150
We're not sponsored by Lexus.
Needed to get towed away. I drove the Lexus to the dealership and be like, hey, man, like this guy smashed it in front of my house. Long story short, it could not be salvaged because every part of those is $1,500. They're like back tinted window, $1,500. Panel, $1,500. Like everything was $1,500. And then I got a check as a result for $20,000 because that was the red book value because it had no mileage and it had been tricked out.
Telling you, flipping cars.
So I had, unbeknownst to me, bought one for $3,500 and it, the book value on it was $20,000 because she had never driven the thing.
No way.
And so I had $20,000 and I bought my second property with it. And I was out there in Sackville. Sackville's the used car capital of the world. I was there looking at $20,000 BMWs, and which is what Neal would do. This is my Neal phase. But instead, I bought my second duplex with basically no money out of pocket because at the time that could be my down payment. So that's a long-winded story. But either the car was the best thing I bought or the duplex. I don't know, but that's my story.
That was sick. Okay, I like that one. I don't have one as cool as that. I feel like flipping cars, though, has given me my down payment. But I intentionally purchased cars below market value, and then I resold them.
I didn't know what I was doing.
Drive them into people and then try and get insurance money out of it. Yeah. I think that might be insurance fraud.
No, man.
No, I'm just messing with you. I'm messing with you. We're going to edit that. Okay, my second one's a little different, and it's a 2-unit that I bought. It was actually the very first transaction I did as a realtor. And prior to that, I had just finished university. I was living in a basement apartment. I hated it. Anyways, I was so keen as a realtor, like, I gotta get a transaction. And I hadn't put a client transaction through yet. And I found this duplex that came up that I kind of wanted, $240K. And I was going to buy with a partner. And so we went and looked at it, and he's like, this is a shithole. Like, there's no point. It sat on an acre of land, though, in Bedford. And I was like, oh, no, I think it's pretty good. And like I kept pushing him. He said, okay, yeah, sure. But then he kind of just ghosted me. So we put the deposit down. We firmed up on the deal at $240K. Ghosted me.
Ghosted you after you were...
Firm.
Oh, my God. That's a...
Yeah.
Okay.
Anyways, it was kind of wishy-washy. But closing day's coming up. We had nothing in the pipe sorted out. So then I just stepped up. I was like, screw it. I got to get the financing. Sort out the financing. Come up with a down payment. And buy this place. And I didn't know what I was going to do with it. And within like a month or two, like, one of the tenants or two of the tenants both just left. They upped and left. No, one of them just upped and left. Didn't tell me anything, just upped and left. And so I drove out there, and the unit was gross. And I was just like, like all the carpets smell like piss, and the walls are really dark green, and the cabinets were gross. And I was like, what am I going to do with this? Anyways, my lease was coming up, and I was like, you know what? I'm going to move into this thing. And so that's what I did. I moved out there. I took all the carpets up, put down laminate flooring, painted it, put new trim in, redid the bathroom, and like did it all very slowly, very frugally, super cheap. I got all these deals and was doing it in the evenings. I was working like a dog as a realtor. And then like at 8 p.m., my girlfriend used to say our date night every night was Kent. We'd go from at 8 p.m. I'd get home. She had a little hatchback, and we'd go over to Kent. We'd buy supplies. We'd be fixing it up.
Man, when I was fixing up my first place, I'd like dap everyone at Kent when I came in. Like I knew every single person at the Micmac Kent.
This was exactly it. I was at Dartmouth Crossing, and anyways, got it all cleaned up. And it actually wasn't a bad spot. Like it had a nice big yard. We had a fire pit out back. I really ended up enjoying it because there's Bedford's its own little city in a way. Like it has all the things that you need. And so I ended up loving living out there. And it was also a super cheap way to live, which allowed me to get ahead because I had somebody renting another unit. I only paid $240,000 for it. The interest rate was like 2%. So with all my payments and everything in, I worked out that I was spending a couple $100 a month to live, if that, and it allowed me at that time where I was so tight because I had started a new business that was failing like really hard. I wasn't making very much money as a realtor, and I was trying to get this game going. It allowed me to just save,
Yeah.
and actually get ahead. And we would buy Kijiji furniture, and we slowly kept upgrading it and making our way through it. And so like now I'm looking at building a 30-unit building on that property. Which
You still have that?
Yeah, and I ended up keeping the
What?
place. I was so close to selling it, but I kept it. And then I went and met, and they're like, yeah, they probably put they were super keen actually for me to do something with it. So I'm going to go through the permitting process
No
soon.
way, I didn't know that.
And I'm hoping to get around 30 units. But yeah, like it ended up being like, I'm super glad that I bought it. I'm super glad that I moved out there. But the whole time it seemed like a bad buy.
Well, at some point you got to take the risk, right? Like you got to jump, and I think that's one of the good takeaways is calculate it, right? But you gotta pull the trigger. You got to jump, and it's interesting how what do we have in common to those? They're our first buys.
Yeah,
getting yourself going. I mean, they all look good in hindsight, right? Like that's the beauty of time and appreciation, all that. They all look good in hindsight, but the earlier you can get this snowball rolling, the better.
Yeah.
Right. So that's why I tell people all the time, like, what should I look for in the first one? Like, the first one should be like the one that you get quickest, like get it rolling.
It saved my bacon once too, because I was pretty much dead broke and I only owed on it like 150, 180 grand or something. No, I had to put 20% down. So I only owed like 180K and I've been paying it down. So maybe even less. And I was like, oh shit, like I have no money right now. And I was like, well, what's this worth? And the rents had gone up dramatically. When I bought it, it was rented for like 800 and 500. When I re-rented it, I put it up. I think I put it up for 750 or 800, and I had a literal lineup down the street. It was insanity. There was cars everywhere. There was a lineup going down the staircase. I under rented it, obviously, but a great tenant. She's still in there today. But I reappraised it for 375, 400K, and so I had $150,000 that I didn't ever even think about. And I needed it because I had no money, and I was able to get the money out, and it's still cash flowed because the rate wasn't bad, and I had increased the rents by like literally double. And when I bought it, it cash flowed a bunch. And so like I was like, this is it. That property ended up being like my saving grace in a lot of ways.
This is why I tell this to people all the time. Like, the power of real estate is like, what if an emergency happened in your life, right? A real terrible situation, and you needed to come up with $40,000 in 30 days.
Yeah. Like,
could you do it? And a lot of people understandably are like, no, I can't do it. If you have real estate, you can. And here's another one. Like, what if the opportunity of a lifetime came up that could change your life forever, but you needed $60,000 in 30 days? Could you do it? And oftentimes, again, the answer is no. But those that have real estate, if you get in a jam or if you have a once-in-a-lifetime opportunity, having real estate allows you to, survive those situations or take advantage of those opportunities.
Just park all your cars out of your driveway in the street on a really crooked angle. So that and around a blind
Just
corner.
wait for that windfall, baby. That sweet insurance settlement money.
You want to hit your last one?
Is this my last one?
It's the last one.
I can't remember what my first one was. I think I just did a long-winded answer on my first one.
Maybe.
I mean, the big thing that changed my trajectory was when I took all the small multis, because I bought that first one, and then I used the money from the broken Lexus to buy the second one, and then I scrounged some money together to buy a fixer-upper single-family house, and then I bought another duplex, and actually I bought another single-family home in Halifax, basically just a flip because it was such a good deal, and then I bought a duplex over in Dartmouth, and the duplex was the first one that I had to put 20% down on, and it was pretty cheap. It was like $230,000 because it was a dump. But by the time I did all my closing costs, I'm like, man, I had to put, I think it was like $80,000 down on this thing, right? I couldn't believe it. I'm like, this doesn't seem smart to me. Like putting all this money down, 20% down on these. And it's like, I probably sat down with Igor, who I kind of consult for all my financing stuff. He's like, yeah, I mean, at that sort of thing, like, why wouldn't you just put 20 or 25% down on like an actual multi-unit building?
Mm-hmm.
And I've mentioned this building before. We brought it up in one of the early episodes where we talked about our first properties and stuff. It was a 12-unit building. It was right in my neighborhood. I'd stared at it for the longest time. I'd walked into the lobby and been a creeper on it before. And man, just coincidentally, it came up, and it
creeping
was
the property, not the tenants.
Yeah, $640,000 for 12 units, all 2 bedrooms, great location. Jeez. And what I did is I refinanced every single property, like all 5 of my properties that I'd, just busted my butt to get these things. I took every dollar out of all of them. I had to get my mom to guarantee a loan as well, just to get the down payment on that place. But needless to say, at $640,000, I've done very well on that property and multiple refinances since. It's probably, I don't know, my rents are low there, but it's probably worth, I don't know, 160, 170 a door at least, and that's only that low because the rents aren't that high.
I'd say if the rents were proper, it'd be over $2.5 million.
Yeah, so that's the one, and it was a gigantic risk. I remember, you want to talk sleepless nights, and on that project, I really struggled, and a couple contractors, and who've become really good friends since, kind of bailed me out on it. But again, it's about taking that leap, man. Like once you've kind of plateaued and realized, okay, I've done this, I've mastered this now. With the first purchase, it was like, all right, I've helped other people do this. I know I can do this. I know how this works, and I did it. And that this was like, all right, I know how the small scale multis work. I've got that. All I need to do now is just multiply that across 12 units instead of 2. And I pulled the trigger on it, and it's changed my life since.
Totally. I'm going to echo almost the exact same. Going from buying houses to getting into my first multi-unit. It was an 11-unit building, and I saw a news article that it had caught on fire.
Oh, yeah.
And I've talked about it many times on here before, but...
Smoking hot deal.
Literally smoking hot. And I went to the owner's house and chatted with her, and she was super nice. She brought me in. We chatted for a bit. Then we met again at the property. We walked through it. And like it was, the whole bottom floor was completely gutted. There was nothing left. Insurance had already gone through and ripped it all to bits. And basically, yeah, we talked about it, and she was like, look, once you see all the damage, you might not be so interested. And I walked through, and I was still interested. And so she texted me maybe after 3-4 days and says, hey, like, do you want to make an offer? And I said, yeah. And I texted her a number, and it was a bit low, but I was just very nervous. I'd never bought into that before. I was a little stressed out. I didn't know what the numbers were going to be on the back end because I hadn't received any appraisals on true multi-unit buildings at that point in time. And she didn't respond for 3-4 days, and I'm freaking out. And finally she texts me back and she says, yeah, I'll do it. Let's do this. And so I sign it up. We get into it. And then after a few weeks, I explained to her that I'm having some trouble with financing. And it's because I'm new. I have no background in this at all. And a lot of banks don't want to get involved. And the building has been caught on fire multiple times in the past. And so there's a lot of banks that don't want to be involved that have already been burnt on it, pun intended.
Hey.
And so she ends up stepping up to give me a vendor take back for almost the entire amount. She did 85% for me, and I did the 15%.
85% vendor take back.
And so on that closing, I got cash for my first construction draw from a private. And that private too, same thing. I talked with them, and we're actually going to be presenting with them tomorrow. They said they were taking a flyer on me on that first building because same deal. I had no background. I had no stabilized income. I really had nothing. I had a couple properties to my name, which gave them a bit of security, and they blanketed all that. But that was the only thing, and no regular bank would touch me. And so anyways, I got into it. I ended up going. The numbers worked out better than I thought. The rental cost way more than I thought. But the end value came out much higher than I thought as well. And it just worked. The timing worked out really well. I was able to get some cash out of it. And I ended up doing a CMHC. And because the numbers were so good, CMHC ended up giving me, I think it worked out to almost being 88% loan to value. And now that properties continue to appreciate a bunch, and it cash flows really, really well. It's locked in at a great rate. And so that really set the tone and kind of allowed me to go. And the cash that I pulled out of that, I used to buy the other 6 buildings on that street.
Exactly.
Like it set the tone and changed my life and got me rolling.
Yeah, 100%. Yeah, that's super interesting. Would love to hear any, any details about your first buy, anything like that. Just throw it down in the comments. I think we probably
tell us the one that you missed. Which one you said?
Why do you gotta make people?
You got to think about that. What's the one?
When I was broke, I had rich habits. When I was broke, I had rich habits.